respectful debate. Well, joining us from Melbourne, the Director of Legal Advocacy at the Human Rights Law Centre and the incoming CEO of Equality Australia, Anna Brown, is here on the panel. Thank you, Anna. What's your take on the Ruddock Review and its contents now that we finally have it in our hot little hands?
Well, I think we can all agree that no one should be mistreated because of their faith. But I think I remain concerned that attempts to legislate religious freedom may actually come at the expense of equality for lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender people. We have to remember that the genesis of this inquiry was a misguided idea that marriage somehow posed a threat to religious freedom, and that's something that I reject utterly. I think until we see the detail of this legislation, we have to remain concerned that conservative coalitions will be trying to extract equality, and we need to see the detail before we can assess whether there is actually any threat present to LGBTI.
So Sarah, what Anna is actually trying to say is that religions should be able to hold or certainly teach alternatives about sexuality than the one that she holds. It's come down to issues around marriage. And I'm afraid the Ruddock Report says it quite plainly, Anna. We don't have the right between freedom of religion and equality for everybody. We have to do both, it says. And I certainly believe that. But that includes, for religious bodies, for people who want to send their kids to religious schools, for example, the right to hear the teaching of faith. And that means that they need to be able to quite explicitly do what Archbishop Porteous did initially about marriage without being hauled off to the Anti-Discrimination Commission. And they need to be able to have staff who are going to adhere to and those aspects of the faith that they're teaching. Now, I'd really be interested to know, do you believe that we should be able to teach the tenets of our faith?
The idea that marriage equality somehow posed a threat to is absolutely misguided, and that's why...
We've moved on from that. Now we have a debate. We know that those aspects sent off to the Australian Law Reform Commission, and you've argued, and others like you have argued, that schools should not be able to choose staff on the basis of faith when it crosses over with... Now, that's a non-negotiable from a Christian school point of view.
So this idea that faith and sexuality are some two separate things and never come together is absolutely false. There are LGBTI people of faith.
I completely agree with you.
Let's have a look at the misinformation in this debate. The law currently allows schools to set reasonable rules in relation to their students. It allows to set reasonable standards of conduct in relation to their employment, schools to particular religious ethos.
It's just remarkable that the LGBTQI community has been in this situation for so long, where the government is saying, their children who are of different sexuality than the kind that people want to teach, might not have a proper place in a school, or that a teacher, because of their sexuality, can be dismissed from their job. Look, we've got to be really clear about how rights work. Human rights are non-negotiable. Of course people should have the right, but they shouldn't have the right to a way which infringes the rights of others. That is just a philosophical principle. I can't say I want to drive on a different side of the road, tells me to do so. If I undermine their quality of life, I put them out, then I just can't do that. That doesn't undermine my freedom of religion. I can still practice my religion, but I can't practice my religion in ways which undermine the fundamental rights of other people.
But what's the harm if a person can't teach in a Christian school? They can teach in another school. Why is there a harm? Because
they might be Christian themselves.
Human rights is balanced by proportionality. No. The proportionality test here is that if Christian schools can't exist and teach their ethos and make their own rules about what that means, then there won't be Christian schools. But if a teacher isn't employed by a Christian school, they can go to another school.
Can I just say that I think so much of this is black and white, or being depicted as black and white, on both by you and by Stephen, when actually most people, this is not an issue about black and whites. There is to me, this was always a solution searching for a problem. We have yet to find an example of a child who's ever been expelled on the basis of their sexuality.
Correct.
So I think that's ridiculous.
In that case, why should schools have this power? If on top of that, they're not asking for the power. So why not just rule this out once and for all? Why give it to the ALRC for further review?
I don't think they should have given it to the ALRC, but there is this debate. Because the politicians actually couldn't agree on this last week. It's just, another way to kind of put it off. But I think for most people in the country, this is a very strange political debate that actually has very little relevance to them. Most people do, live and let live in terms of religious tolerance, and I don't think people want to change that particularly.
So in terms of politics then, Jennifer Hewitt, is this a good call to release the review, to announce the ALRC's involvement to keep this on the boil?
I mean, I guess they thought they had to, seeing it was out there. I don't think this is a particular... But I think this whole kind of thing has been all year. The fact is, though, that for most people, there's a kind of a debate about principles that actually don't... I mean, the fact is most children are not voted against. There is an issue with some teachers, perhaps, in some religious schools, but that's about it.
We did put in evidence to recent inquiries. This is happening in schools now. There are lots of schools that are doing the right thing. They're welcoming, they're inclusive, but sadly there are trans students that are being told that this isn't the right school for you. They're staying at school due to really harmful, damaging practices. So let's remember there's kids' schools that need to be kept safe. It's not false.
Yeah, I also don't think we can ignore that we are taught dealing with the ability for quite clear discrimination to occur in relation to both students and staff in a school system which is very much publicly funded. There is a lot of money that goes in to this schooling system, Stephen, and across interfaith-based community services. ACOS is very clear. We are very clear that we do not support the ability for discrimination to occur against students or employees when you are being employed in an organisation that receives public. It does affect people in a very significant way. We've all colleagues who've had to hide the deep sort of mental health stress associated with this, and these are part of a big public system.
Well, I'm not sure that a law or a bill is going to change that. I really don't think that will make a difference.
But I think that the mood of the community is very clear. I think the way that we saw the overwhelming that said that, you know, in these places people were really surprised that actually in 2018 this will happen, that people had to pretend they were married with somebody of the same sex, that they put at risk their employment. These are big systems associated with the delivery of crucial services.
They're individual employers, Cassandra.
There's a really simple principle here, which I totally think that the vast majority of people would sign up to. You should be able to practice your religion freely, but you shouldn't be allowed to harm people. If there is harm being done as a result of religious exemptions or religious practices, the government has to step in. And that is just cut and dried. It's not caveated. It's not complicated. Practice your religion, yes. Don't harm other people.
And that's it for The Drum Weekly. Thanks for joining us.